All right. Well, thank you, Rich, for that very nice introduction. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. It's still 10:30 in the morning here in San Diego. It's a little bit warm, but we'll manage to get through this. Today, we're going to talk about the Citrix Cloud deployment for a XenApp XenDesktop environment, and we're going to look at the architecture of what is the Citrix Cloud. We'll examine some of the key components that are in there and some differences between an on-premise version of a XenApp XenDesktop deployment and a cloud-based version of the XenApp XenDesktop deployment using the Citrix Cloud. Now, there are multiple permutations of how you can use the cloud to deploy out your XenApp and XenDesktop environment. Citrix Cloud being one, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, etc. We're going to focus on the Citrix Cloud on the system. So as part of that, I have a few PowerPoint presentations I'm going to present to you, as well as an environment where we're going to be actually using the Citrix. Take a look at the Citrix Cloud options that you'll see, and we'll evaluate some of the differences. I'll do a demonstration on how to deploy resources, and we'll look at the differences on the resources on that as well. So we're going to look at how this system is going to work and how it's all going to come into play. So what is the cloud? The cloud, Citrix Cloud, is an alternative for deploying your XenApp and XenDesktop infrastructure. It's an alternative. One of the things to keep in mind, however, is that your resources will always remain on-premise when you're using the Citrix Cloud. You could use Azure or Amazon Web for those resources, but today's presentation is going to focus specifically on leaving your resources within your on-prem data center. The Citrix Cloud version is broken up into services. So rather than having the XenApp XenDesktop servers, we have the Citrix Workspace service. And this is where we can bring in the various services that you will see demonstrated today. We have the XenApp XenDesktop service, the XenMobile service, ShareFile service, NetScaler Gateway service. So these are different methodologies of deploying out a virtualized environment using the Citrix Cloud. We have the ability using the XenApp and XenDesktop service to break it down into the XenApp service only, the XenDesktop service, using secure browser, essentials, etc. If you want to do the XenMobile deployment, we have the XenMobile Standard, Advanced, and Premium service, the ShareFile service, the NetScaler Gateway Standard service, etc. We've also got some additional tools that you'll see inside of the cloud for maintaining and monitoring your system above and beyond what you would normally see in any deployment. For instance, we have Studio, slightly different than the Studio you'd see on-prem. We have Director, slightly different than what you'd see with the deployment on-prem. NetScaler Gateway, slightly different than what you'd see with an on-prem version of NetScaler Gateway. One thing you won't see inside of the Citrix Cloud is a storefront service. Instead, we have a different version called the Workspace service on the system. So when you're looking at a cloud-based version, you have the various services that we can come in and provide for our users. The NetScaler Gateway service, secure browser service, smart tools, and the XenApp XenDesktop. This is the component I'm going to be focusing on today. The smart tools allows you to monitor your system very easily. When we're looking at the system here, we don't have a storefront per se on the system. We have a workspace service on there. So this is your main console when you're looking at the Citrix screen. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at a quick architecture, then we'll come back, we'll bounce back and forth, and we'll see what we have available to us. So First thing we want to look at, and this is when you're an administrator, this is something that you'll want to be aware of, are going to be some of the differences in the cloud architecture and the operations that you'll see within the deployment. Now, in a traditional deployment, when you're looking at a traditional deployment within the system, you're looking at all of your components being deployed locally. So you'll have a user layer, all of your users, they can be internal or external. They're coming into your access layer, which is on your local system, and you'll have a storefront server. Potentially you might have a NetScaler gateway on the system. The control layer, this is where you're going to have delivery controllers, Active Directory, a site database. Then all of your resources are on-prem as well. So your VDA systems are on the system here. Your compute layer, that's your infrastructure. This is your hypervisor, whether it's Xen Server, ESX, KVM, or Hyper-V, whatever you have. This is a traditional deployment for a XenApp, XenDesktop environment. So how does the cloud differ on this system? Well, it differs in that we get rid of things. We get rid of the delivery controller. So your delivery controller is gone. It's no longer on-prem. We get rid of the site database. So you no longer need to worry about the site database in place. Citrix will handle all of that for you. You don't worry about your license server. That's gone. The replacement for those are on the cloud. So what you'll see is your delivery controllers are gone, your SQL servers are gone, and your license servers are gone. Those are hosted in the cloud. You deploy, however, a component called your Cloud Connector. This is a Windows 2012 R2 server or a 2016 server that has a component called the Cloud Connector agent installed on it. That agent will act as a proxy between all of your resources and the cloud. So the virtual delivery agents will register with the cloud, then the Cloud Connector will connect up to the XenApp and XenDesktop service across the internet using a secure connection. So we've eliminated the majority of the XenApp, XenDesktop components on the system so that it's all in the cloud. So when you're looking at it now, this is where you're going to see things like this. You're going to have your delivery controllers up here. So your delivery controllers are going to be in the cloud. Your database server is going to be in the cloud. Your license server will be in the cloud. And these components, and any component for that matter that's in the cloud, is maintained by Citrix. Citrix is going to manage and maintain these particular components for you. You no longer need to deal with that anymore. So any updates, you will not need to worry about. Those will automatically be rolled out for you. High availability is automatically taken care of for you by Citrix. So your SQL Server, you don't need to worry about deploying multiple SQL servers. You don't need to worry about that SQL Server license. The license server is going to be the latest and greatest. Now, optionally, when you're looking at the cloud deployment, optionally, you can have an on-prem storefront server. You can still have that. You would point your storefront server to the Cloud Connector rather than the delivery controller. You can also have an on-prem NetScaler gateway. Leaving these on-prem gives you a few advantages in the way of configuration. Some of the configuration options that you have control of with an on-prem version are no longer available when you're dealing with the cloud-based version. But if you want, you can use your NetScaler gateway inside of the Citrix Cloud. This is going to give you a ICA proxy only. So you won't have a lot of the additional components that your NetScaler would give you with an on-prem. So the responder policies, rewrite policies, application control, etc. So it's not a full version of the NetScaler gateway. The storefront is replaced by the workspace. So you'll have a workspace connector in the system that you will define based on what you need. Now, what you're also limited in what you can do with this one. So some of the options you have with an on-prem storefront server, we don't have available on the system. So if you're looking at deploying those and you're looking at, say, your Netscaler gateway service and you want to manage this, we're going to have a few. We're limited in what we can actually do. Let's see how this guy's going to come in here. So you'll see we've got some gateway services, and you'll see we can configure the gateway service to access our XenApp and our XenDesktop environment. So this will give us some options when we're looking at the system. So if we're looking at the workspace or the storefront server, this is where you can come in and define your workspace configuration. So what's your default URL, which you can't change. You can do it on your local one. And so we have the system here, and I can edit my workspace if I need to. So this will give us some options. For authentication on the workspace, we have a few options. We can use Active Directory or Azure. We can customize it, but when you're customizing the workspace configuration for replacing storefront on-prem, really the only thing you do is the logo and branding. So that's it, background color. You don't have a whole host of the other options that you might have on the system, groupings, timeouts, etc. Those are all going to be have to remain on-prem when you're looking at the system there. So the system is taking all the major components and it's kicking it off and putting it into the cloud, which gives you some benefits. There are some distinct benefits to doing this. One is the service level goal. There's a goal that Citrix is dedicated to reaching if possible, and that's going to be a 99.9% uptime. They're looking to ensure that within any 30 calendar day period, 99.9% of the time, your users will be able to access the applications and desktops that you have given them. There are some exceptions to that 99% rule, so there are going to be a few exceptions there. For instance, if you have misconfigured components. So if you go in and you misconfigure your components either on-prem or within the cloud, this is no longer going to be something they're going to look at. They're not going to say, yeah, no, sorry, not going to work. You did some misconfiguration. So that there are some things that will preclude that. Now, this is just a goal. This is not a service level agreement. This is just a goal that they are shooting for on the system, on the environment. So that's one benefit to the system. Another benefit is the fact that there are multiple regions where you can place your cloud-based infrastructure. So where are your users? My users are in Europe, so I'll place them in Europe. I'll do my infrastructure within the Europe region, or they're US on the system. So you can place the infrastructure on the cloud as close to the user as is possible within the system. This gives you that option on your environment here. Now, one of the limitations on this is that once you select your region, you can't change it. You'll have to delete that subscription and do a new subscription. If you've got multiple regions, you'll need to have multiple regions within the Citrix Cloud. So there are some limitations on your system to be aware of. Now, each region is where your metadata is going to be stored. So the system is going to store all of your metadata about your environment. Where are the controllers inside of your system? Where's your on-prem? Where's your hypervisor within the system? So any data that's resulting from traffic will be stored within the system on the SQL Server database. Mapping users to what are called library mappings. And I'll show you how to create a library rather than a deployed resource on the system. This gives you, there are some benefits because you can be very specific about where you're going to place your your infrastructure. They've also got a high level of security. Each customer that comes into the cloud will have their metadata secured within their own separate containers. And those containers are going to be uh, deployed over multiple regions to provide you with high availability. Now, one thing that's never there, you'll never see your resources within the cloud. Your resources will always be on site. So customer A will define their resources. They'll have a connector on the system. You'll have your application data all stored locally. These are then connected up to the access control, and you'll see that customer A has their own metadata. It's containerized and separate from all the other systems. So customer B's metadata and customer C's metadata, these will never mingle on the system. The only data that's in the cloud is the metadata that Citrix Studio or the Cloud Director provide your system. So everything's basically locked down on the system. So one second benefit. We've also got the ability for security. So we're looking at the environments here when you're looking at the systems here. Let me make a change here real quick. When you're looking at the Citrix Cloud, you've got your VDA systems and your receivers coming in to the Netscaler gateway or directly to the storefront servers to get to the VDAs. These are all going to go through the connector. The connectors will connect up to the cloud using 443. We have a secure connection. That's the default. So we'll need to make sure we have certs installed on these particular components, obviously. We're going to use AES encrypted passwords, and then the encryption key and the ICA key will be kicked through for single sign-on for Windows Logon. The VDAs and the storefronts are all local. So if you want to use port 80 on these, you're more than welcome to, but the connector will always use a 443 connection on the system. Now, when you're looking at various components, the user password will flow from the client device to the Netscaler gateway for authentication on the system. Whether that Netscaler gateway is in the cloud or on-prem doesn't matter that much. Then the Netscaler gateway will kick over to the storefront, which then goes to the connector, which then goes to the delivery controllers within the cloud, which then checks with the SQL Server in the cloud, and then the traffic goes back. So we go back to the system, to the storefront. The user then selects their the resource. Then the receiver goes through the process. The delivery controllers in the cloud will enumerate, select the resource, generate an ICA in conjunction with storefront. Then the receiver takes that ICA file, connects up to the VDA on-prem, and then launches the desktop or launches the resource within the system there. So different options. So security, we got some security on the system. One of the nice things are the updates. So when you're looking at your environment, we've got updates on the system. So with this, Citrix has developed what they call, there are two terms you'll see. You're going to see a term called Evergreen and Canary Program. The two things mean different things on the system. Evergreen is Citrix's promise that your infrastructure, i.e. your delivery controllers, your SQL Server, your license server, etc., will always be the latest version of the Citrix environment, XenApp, XenDesktop on the system. So many times when you're looking at your system, if you're in the cloud, you may see a newer version that has actually been released. Currently, we're on 7.18, but 7.19 is already being rolled out within the Citrix environment. So we have 7.19 already in place. Case in point, if I look at my cloud service, and we're going to come and look at the service here in a minute, if I look at my Cloud Studio, it should tell me that I'm running 719, unless it's not come and done the update yet on this one. Let's give this guy a second. So we'll let him connect. There we go. So the system will be evergreen. It's going to be the latest version on the system, which may be rolled out to you before anything else has been rolled out publicly. So before it has general release. Come on. So if I look at my studio here and I look at the version, let's see what version I'm doing here. Notice it's 719. Currently, the latest, greatest version was 718. So oftentimes when you're dealing with the cloud, you're going to get the newest version before anybody else does. The other thing we have for that evergreen, and this is for those companies that are a little bit risk adverse, they have what's called the Canary Program. The Canary Program is a 2-week window where updates are rolled out. Every 2 weeks, the system will roll out updates. The Canary Program indicates that a customer has selected to be the canary. Now, this goes back to the days when they'd take canaries down into the mines to make sure that the air was good enough for the miners to breathe without causing any serious effects on the system. So if your company is willing to be the latest and greatest in the trial case, you can be a customer one. The customer ones will always start out using release A. This is where the updates will be done. Your updates will always be done right here. Customer one will get those out on the first day of the rollout cycle, which is a 4-day cycle. Once that has been done, the system will slowly start rolling out the updates to your users. Customer 2, 3, and 4, while release A is out, will be using release B, which is a separate container. It's an identical environment, it just doesn't have the updates. After the first day, the customers will start being rolled out to the other systems. So this guy would then come over here, and he would now be in release A. This would be disconnected. Customer 3 would then be rolled out to the system here, and then customer 4, I should say, will come out. So after 4 days, 100% of your customers will have the updates. This is called the Canary Program. This is something you can opt into if you need to. If there's a problem, so let's say that the Canary comes in and the customers that are in the Canary Program start generating support tickets saying, we've lost connectivity, this is not working, et cetera, et cetera. They have an immediate rollback on this. So we have an update. Whenever there's an error on the system will roll back. So if a problem is detected during the updates, the Citrix Cloud is rolled back within 5 minutes. This is done very, very rapidly. We just reconnect them to the new machines. The one exception to that will be your controllers, your connectors, I should say. The cloud connectors that are deployed on-prem take a little bit longer to roll back because they do these in serial. So when you're dealing with updates, and I actually had this happen to me last night, I have 2 connectors. Connector 1 said, I'm doing an update, and it rebooted. So I had to go over to connector 2. 15 minutes later, connector 2 said, I'm doing updates. So they take a little bit longer on the connectors to downgrade them because it has to be sent out to all the connectors that are deployed within your system. But it gives you a very rapid option. So when you're looking at the Canary Program, you'll see it. This is a 4-day cycle that happens every 2 weeks. On day 1, the Canary test will come in. These are any customers that are coming with a Canary will come in for day 1 on the system. So the control plane, the cloud connectors will automatically be updated. The system will then go over a 4-day process to make sure that we're not putting something out that's going to cause problems. So on the first day, your canaries will come in. Day 2, 10% of your users will be rolled out. Then by day 3, 40% of the customers will have the updates. And then by day 4, all the customers will then have the updates in the system. And you have an you can opt in or opt out. So you can tell the system, you know what, I'm okay with trying the updates on the system. within the environment. So I want the latest stable code as quickly as it comes out before anybody else gets them. You can also opt out. So you can say, you know what, I want to wait till we've got 100% state achievable inside of the environment before I actually do this. So this thing gives us the benefits, especially those updates. And you're not having to worry about updating your delivery controllers or any of the other components. The cloud connector, this is the one component, and then we're going to look at the consoles, and we're going to move around the console. I'll do a demonstration on how to deploy out our resources on the system. Here, hang on one second. There we go. So first thing we look at are the cloud connector. This is an additional component. It takes 5 minutes to install. It's a very rapid deployment on the system, not difficult at all. There's not much you really have to worry about. This serves as the channel for communication between your on-prem system and the cloud-based prem. It's simple to deploy. Literally, you just install it. It's not operated as a VPN, so you don't have to worry about having a VPN on the system. All connections are outgoing, port 443 only. Supports some web proxies. It's secured by service key per connector. It's self-updating, and it's evergreen. But if you have multiple cloud connectors, that evergreen system may cause a lag time if we need to roll it back because of the way the system deals with it. The cloud connectors are going to be installed on a domain-joined Windows Server operating system on-prem. It works behind any NATs and HTTP proxies. Any inbound messages are sent to the connector rendezvous in the cloud at a special cloud service. Messages are then transferred via WebSocket architecture to the connectors on the system. And these will be load balanced across multiple connectors. Outgoing connection goes over a secure HTTPS web request on the environment. So easy to configure because there's not much you really have to configure. You then go in and you can choose how you want your deployment to be configured. Now, in my particular environment, I have some storefront servers and I have a delivery controller on-prem. But with my storefront server, if you want to leave your storefront on-prem on the system, that's fine. You can do that. You just need to do one thing. You need to change your delivery controllers from the delivery controllers to your connectors. So I need to create a deployment. So you would create a deployment instead of deploying the system as a on-prem. We'll just do a real quick deployment here. Rather than defining your delivery controllers, you would define your cloud connectors. Now in my environment, I have two cloud connectors. I have this guy here, and if I look at the system and what's been installed, I installed this, I put certificates on this guy. No. If we look at what's currently installed, you'll see that I've got the cloud connector installed on this particular machine. So I can use the storefront server to connect up to that. So we'll just call this store. Put in my delivery controllers, but instead of my delivery controllers, I'm going to put in my connectors. So they will proxy to the system. So this would be nyc-con-001.workspacelab.com. And instead of putting in delivery controllers, I'm going to put in my connectors. And they've got certificates on it, so I can use a secure connection. So the system can then come in and use that within the environment. So I'm just going to create this guy. So my storefront server is connected up to to the controllers, which will then connect up to the cloud and then to the delivery controllers. So these will then, the connectors then connect up to my resources inside of the system. So if I'm looking at my resources here and I look at my resource locations, the connectors connect up to the cloud and say, all right, I'm in my New York data center. I've got two cloud connectors In this case, I have New York City Con 1 and Con 2. These are what are going to come into the cloud on the system so that we can connect up to the environment and get those working. Once you have your cloud connectors defined, you then have some services. And I'm going to do a quick option here, and then we'll take some connection. I'm going to do a demo, and we'll take some questions. So I'm going to go to the cloud-based delivery controllers and the cloud-based studio. This is going to be a little bit different than you'll see on your on the system here. So we're going to look at a couple of things here real quick. Go back to PowerPoint while this guy does his stuff. I'm going to get this guy going while we finish this up. So when you want to manage and configure your system, you do a couple things. You log on to cloud, and you can create a trial account if you want to. If you want to try this out, you can. You'll see the option here: sign up, try free. Just go to Citrix Cloud, and you're good to go. Once you're on the system, you'll see the dashboard, and you'll see the services that you have available. You need to manage these and enable them as your company deems that they need to roll them out. You'll see what are called library offerings, resource locations, domains. Okay. When we have different options when you're looking at the XenApp, XenDesktop environment. In the what Citrix calls the hamburger member, because it's got the three little things, the two buns and the patty, you open up your cloud console. This gives you a couple of options here. Within the cloud console, you're going to see the studio. Now, there's some differences in the studio. On the left, you'll see the on-prem version of Citrix Studio. There are some things on here that we don't in the cloud. We have the ability to do administrators, controllers, licensing, app vpublishing. In the cloud, we don't have those options. The administrators are done in a different location. Controllers are done in a different location. Licensing is not something you need to worry about, and then app vpublishing is not supported. So, but if I look at my my cloud on the system, I'm going to see a few things. I've got my studio, and within the studio, I've got a machine catalog. One of the things I did was I connected up my environment to my local hosting infrastructure. So within the hosting under the configuration, I defined the connection into my Xen server, which is this machine right here. You'll notice that I have server 1, 2, and 3. This is my on-prem version. This is my cloud-based. The connectors will be defined within my zones. I'll see that I've got my two connectors are within the Citrix Cloud connector. I've got my host connected to the Xen server, and I've got a single machine catalog. That single machine catalog has two machines in it. So if I open it up, I have server 002 and server 003. So I'm going to add in a new machine. See how rapid this is. I'm going to add in a new machine onto the catalog. I'll add in one machine. I'll use the same account naming structure I used for the previous ones. I have to enter my credentials, so this is a little bit different. Now I have to put in my domain credentials on the system here. So that the cloud-based studio can connect up to Active Directory locally and says, okay, let's create one new account. So I'll let this guy finish, and if I go to my hypervisor here, you're going to see 4 pop in here in just a moment. So the system, it takes a little bit longer because of that cloud, but it's communicating with the hypervisor saying, you know what, create a new system there. So it's going to add in a new server on the system. There it is. So there's my server 4. So the cloud was able to communicate with the on-prem hypervisor, create my resources. Great. So it's doing some additional things. Now when I want to provide out applications on the system, one, I need to have a storefront server. So I've got my storefront server deployed on the system. When I want to deploy out applications, I go to my studio, I create a delivery group, and here's where we're going to see another change on the system. So I'm going to deliver out my resources, and I've got 2 machines that are available to deliver out resources. So I'm going to create a delivery group. You'll see a difference. Right. I'll choose my machine. There's my server catalog. I'll just use one of these, and I'll select OK. Now this is where we can choose. Do we want to leave user management to the Citrix Cloud, or do you want to use authenticated users within your domain on-prem, or restrict it to users of the delivery group? So what do you want to do? We can leave it in the cloud, or you can do it in the prem. I'm going to leave it in the cloud so that we can do what are called library resources. So this is a major difference. So I'll select that. I'll just go ahead and add in some applications from the start menu. It's going to connect up to the server and say, all right, what do you want? So let's get that guy there. So I'll go ahead and do Excel, PowerPoint, get this guy. We'll do OneNote, Paint, PowerPoint, and we'll do Word. So this is going to provide out the applications for the users. I'll select Next. Give the delivery group a name. We'll just call this the NYC delivery group. Oops. This will be Office. What's your display name for desktops? If you're doing desktops, we'll say Server 2016. And I'll finish. And this will create a delivery group on the system for our users. But one of the things I didn't do was assign the applications out to users. So I need to assign out the applications to users by defining my library. So there's the system there. I've got my applications, but they're not assigned to anybody. So I need to come into the system and assign these to my users by creating a library. This allows you to deploy your resources out to users in different ways. So the system's going to come in here and refresh and look at the delivery groups that I have. Give it a second here. There we go. Notice here's my delivery groups. I've got a desktop. I've got my applications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know what? Let's go ahead and take this delivery group and let's add some users to it. So I'm going to manage my subscribers. There's my workspace lab. I'll say we'll just do the HR group. And there's my HR group. I want to give HR1 that particular option. And there it is. So I've got this guy, user 1. And I'm good to go. So it's adding it to the library on the system. So it's subscribed. So now I'll see 1 subscriber. And on the applications, I can do the same thing. So I can define my resources by managing the subscribers in the system. So in this case, I'll give the applications to the entire HR group. So we have a slightly different way of bringing in the users here on the system. So a slightly different way of giving out resources. So, but you have a choice. You can do the same. You could do everything still on-prem. So on-prem, if you want to use your delivery controllers, you still have the option of coming in and bringing your delivery controllers, creating your delivery groups on the system, and deploying your resources out this way. So you do have some options. One last difference between these environments is going to be the Citrix Director. There's a big difference on the Citrix Director when you're looking at the environment here. Let's get this guy to the right slide. Come on. There we go. So when you're using Citrix Director, you can use on-prem or you can use the cloud-based. But on the cloud-based, there are a few things that we're still limited on. And you won't see. For instance, integrating with Netscaler MOS is not supported on the system. You'll no longer see your infrastructure down at the bottom. Some of your alerts and applications are not available. So the monitor looks very, very similar to what you'd see inside of the on-prem Citrix Director. So that's a quick and dirty presentation on the cloud-based versions for the XenApp XenDesktop environment. Rich, I'm going to hand the webinar over to you for the Q&A.
Okay, excellent, David. Thank you. We have a couple of questions, and I'll do my best to read these to you, David, and then you can elaborate. So the first question is, it says, please elaborate on the migration path to cloud for DC, licensing server, site database, etc.
That's a more involved question that we can get into here. If you're talking about migrating everything you currently have, you'll need to talk to your Citrix representative to do that. If you're doing a new deployment, it's relatively straightforward. But that's a much more involved question than we can get on here. Rich, if you want to send me that one, I can try and be a little bit more specific in an email. It'll take about 15-20 minutes to talk about.
Sounds good. Are those topics things that are covered
Yes.
in the in the course?
Yes.
It is. Okay. Okay, so Roger, I will forward that question over to David, and he'll reach out with a better explanation. Okay, next question. Where do you make the opt-in, opt-out selection for the Canary program?
You do that within your account subscription. We didn't go into your account, creating the account subscription and all the various options there on the system. So that would be within your account subscription settings.
Okay.
Or talk to your Citrix representative.
Okay, next question. I hope we read between the lines here. Any LTSR option versus CR? So long-term service release versus current release?
Correct. No, you get the current release.
Got it.
If you want to do LTSR, you have to stay on-prem.
Only for on-prem. Okay, got it. What happens if my internet connection goes down and my DCSQL license are in the cloud?
If your internet connection goes down and everything's in the cloud, existing connections into your VDAs will be fine. New connections, you'll be using cached licensing on the system. We can still use there's a local host cache functionality on the connectors on the system, so you'll still be able to get in connections on there using cache licensing on the system. You just won't be able to do new components. You'll want to get that guy back up as quickly as possible.
Okay, perfect. Okay, here's another question. Is Citrix going to continue to support AppV applications?
On-prem.
Just on-prem, so not in the cloud.
Right.
Got it. And then another one, can you run Director local with controller in the cloud?
Yes, I've not done it, but I've been told you can do it.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have, David. And I just wanted to mention, because of that first question we had, the cloud training, there's a couple of different options. So there's a 3-day course that covers Citrix Cloud. And then there's a 2-day course that covers XenApp and XenDesktop on Azure. And so you can take that as one 5-day class. So you get the Citrix Cloud content along with the Azure content, or you can just take those as standalone courses, either take the 3-day cloud class or the 2-day Azure class. And both of those courses qualify for the 20% discount right now for the promotion that we're running. And we have a pretty robust offering of those courses. So all you have to do when you're on the Layer8 website is search under the category Cloud under Citrix, and those courses will come up. And again, if you have any specific questions about those or anything else, you can email myself, Rich at layer8training.com, or info@layer8training.com, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Let me make sure there's no other questions, David, and there's not. So we're good. We appreciate your time attending this webinar. Stay tuned for additional webinars that we're going to be presenting in the coming months, covering all sorts of different Citrix categories and topics. And on behalf of Layer8 Training and David Dart, we sign off and appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to attend our webinar today. Thank you very much.